Good afternoon, everybody, or if you're like me, good morning, because I stayed out until like 3:30 last night. So, how's your festival going? Good. My name is Adam Montgomery. I'm Senior Manager of Programming for the festival, and I also program our episodic section. Bucks County, USA is premiering tomorrow at 10 a.m. in this section, and very excited for that. And I can't believe I have to do that with one of the subjects sitting right in front of me. Um, but in any event, when we first started this, we first announced that we were adding an episodic section to the festival back in 2017. And one of the first calls I got was from the great documentary filmmaker Steve James, who is, obviously known for making 4 and 5 hour Oscar-nominated feature documentaries. And he kind of took to the series documentary format very quickly. And, the first thing he said when he called me was like, hey, is there any way that I could send you the first few episodes of this new documentary project I'm working on? And I was like, yes, Steve, you absolutely can. And it was at that point that I kind of realized that, I think we were going to, do pretty well with playing episodic content at the festival. And so we premiered America to Me, Steve James's documentary that year. And I'm a very firm believer that storytelling shouldn't be limited by running time. And when I first spoke with one of the directors of this project, he had told me that it started out as a feature-length documentary, but it quickly became very clear that the story was a lot bigger than that. And, I think the power of this story is how they framed it around two teenage best friends, Evie and Vanessa, one of whom is here. And just very incredible young ladies who understand the concept that you can still be best friends despite opposing political beliefs. You can still love and respect one another. And I think there's a lot of adults in this world who haven't gotten that message yet. So my hope with this project is that our audience at the festival here will really understand that. And if even a few of them do, it will definitely be a success. So thank you so much to Robert and Barry and Jason and Sarah for letting us premiere the first 2 episodes. Again, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, please come. And with that, I would like to pass it off to the executive producer of Bucks County, USA, Sarah Cross.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming. So my name is Sarah Cross. I have been working to heal divisions and bridge divides in the country in some capacity or another for about 20 years now, and most of that at a place called Stand Together, which is a philanthropic community that was founded by Charles Koch, and now is a diverse community of investors and organizations that are all united by this common belief that everyone has a gift, everyone has something to contribute. And our job as philanthropists is to get rid of whatever barriers are standing in their way to reaching that full potential. And I think one of the greatest threats or the greatest barriers to achieving that potential is the toxic division in the country today. It makes it harder to solve problems, and it leads to an environment where the extremes are tearing apart our social fabric and the liberal institutions that hold us up. So we get tremendously excited by opportunities like this to shift norms in the culture, because this really is a cultural problem at its root, and that means that the power of story is the solution. We're convicted that we become the stories we tell, and right now we are telling stories of what breaks us and the terrible things that we're doing to each other, and not enough about the complicated, beautiful realities of who human beings are and the things that we're capable of building together. So we were incredibly excited to be able to support the content here at Bucks County, USA, but also a great organization called Bridge Entertainment Labs, who we've come to get to know through this experience. That's a group that is committed to telling new American stories of us. They're a film and entertainment outfit to heal the divisions in the country. I've been working with this group for a while as a part of this larger Bridging Divides movement that's been growing in the US. This is a movement of dozens of organizations that are doing the great work that you haven't heard about yet in communities to bridge divides, but they don't know how to talk to people in the entertainment industry. And Bridge Entertainment Labs helps them do that. They help advise content creators and directors, I think everything from A24 to Disney on how to tell these more complicated, beautiful stories. I think the last thing I'd say before handing it over to the moderator is just to offer an encouragement that Americans are hungry for exactly the kind of stories that we and Belle want to tell. They're sick of the divisions. I'm a huge nerd. I could inundate you with the research to back this up. Americans really do share more in common than what divides us, and when we tell these kinds of stories, it inspires them to live out this life. So we're committed to working with anyone across divides where we have agreement. We thought it was really important to show that in the financing structure for that film so that we're practicing what we preach, and we're committed to ensuring that this content translates into social impact and real work in communities to pay it off. But all along that journey, I've been guided by a longtime colleague by the name of Stephen Olikara, who is the founder and first president of Bridge Entertainment Labs. He's also been bridging divides in America for decades. He founded a great group called Future Caucus, which is the only cross-partisan group that supports young elected officials in the country. So it's an issue he knows well. Very excited to roll up our sleeves alongside him, and I'll turn it over to him for what I know is going to be an engaging panel.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all of you for joining this conversation here at Sundance. I want to give a big shout out to Heather Mason and the Impact Lounge team for having us back for a second year. Let's give Impact Lounge a round of applause. And a big thank you to Stand Together, Sarah and Nick, who I saw somewhere here, for their support and for bringing us all together so we could be here for this conversation. I want to thank my entire Bridge Entertainment Labs team, including someone who we like to call the unofficial mayor of Sundance, Jeff Abramson over there. Thank you, guys. And to the entire team of Bucks County, USA, extended family. You all roll in large numbers, I'm learning. So thank you for being here. And one reason, let me just ask all of you this question. Raise your hand if you have struggled to bridge a political divide within your own friend circle or within your family. So pretty much everyone here. And this is a conversation that's happening all across America right now. And it's challenging. And I think one reason why we are excited to have this conversation with Bucks County, USA is to explore how you navigate those differences. And how do you tell stories that seek to heal and depolarize America as opposed to doing the opposite. And Bridge Entertainment Labs is dedicated to answering that question as the entertainment office for this whole movement of organizations dedicated to building social cohesion in America. And I think Bucks County, USA is really a nice exploration of how to do that. So the goal of this panel is to talk with the creators of Bucks County, USA, on the journey of making this type of docuseries, as well as the experience of the filmmakers themselves, and also what it means for the entertainment industry and the Sundance community as a whole. Because I think a key question we have to ask is how can storytelling heal America's toxic divisions? And so that's why I'm excited to have this conversation, and I would like to invite our panelists on stage. So let's give a big round of applause to the creators of Bucks County, USA. All right. So I am going to start with Robert on the far side, and then Jason here. Robert is the co-director of Bucks County, USA, alongside Barry Levinson. And through our conversations leading up to today, Robert, you've talked about how the experience of making this film, this docuseries, is really unlike any other you've had through your very illustrious career in the filmmaking world. So help set the context for this in your own journey as a filmmaker and your intention with choosing this story and ultimately choosing Bucks County as a place to feature.
Sitting on the mic. Well, all of our projects, the documentary projects, but even the narrative projects, have commonality about humanity and prejudice and discord and how people are sort of cast away for their points of view. And if you look at any of our projects, they all have this commonality. And I think that, and some of them have dealt with trauma. And this particular project, I think, was important because for me and for Jason as well, we started talking about it would be great to talk to folks from opposite sides of the political spectrum to be able to understand why they feel the way they do and why it is that things became so bitter. And we saw this sense of dehumanizing people. And it really bothered us. And we thought, well, what can we do? Can we tell a story about this that still has to be entertaining because no one will watch it? And it can't be a story that'll preach to the choir. So it can't be a story from the right or the left because those folks are all cemented in those positions. And so our idea was we want to tell the story from both sides, no bias on our side, and just let the folks tell the story in their own words. And I think the first part of that, of course, was where do we do it, and who do we talk to? I mean, as far as the journey, how it's affected me, so I know that in documentary, you have to gain the trust of the folks that you're talking with. I mean, otherwise they will not share their stories with you. And well, how do you do that? And you have to be curiously interested in those people. They'll see through you, and I'm a curious person. Anybody that works for me, works with me, knows that I'm constantly asking questions to the point of nauseam, really.
Robert, be quiet.
There's a few people that could, right. So, and anyway, so I mean, I'm really curious about people, and I'm also curious about why people have the positions they do. And throughout the course of the project, and we can all speak to this, but I appreciated being with every one of the people that we interviewed, including the people, of course, that are here today, the people that are in the rest of the series, and also the people that may not make it into the series. It just reminds me every day that, you know, we're dealing with human beings, and it's about gaining trust. And I feel rewarded that we were able to bring so many of our subjects here. We call them subjects, participants, characters, talent.
People.
But they're people, right. But they're people. And the fact that we were able to bring them together, and they still have different points of view, but they're here. And that's a real proud moment, and it's also what I'm taking from this as well, the fact that you are all here with us today.
And moving to Jason, talk about how this series fits in the arc of your journey. And in particular, Jason's the producer of Bucks County, USA. I've been, just through my work in the bridge building world, we know that there is a hunger. There's a real exhausted majority in America. Over 70% of Americans want to be a part of creating a healthier discourse. So when you first came across the story, did you think there would be a hunger for it, and why did you get involved with it?
For me, it started as a very personal experience. I was sitting in a focus group on January 7th after the Capitol riots. And it was run by this guy, Frank Luntz, who does a lot of focus groups. He's on TV a lot. And it was with Trump supporters, and, you know, I'm left of center. And I came into this listening session with a lot of judgment. There were things that were being said in the room that I didn't necessarily agree with. But pretty quickly, I felt my heart kind of opening to all these people in the room. And it was really a transformative experience for me. And I haven't had a lot of transformative experiences. And the more I listened to people's anger, the more I heard the pain behind their anger, the more they started to become human beings to me. And by the end of those 2 hours, I wanted to befriend and go out to dinner or have a drink with every single person in that room. And I realized, like, you know, this isn't like an egotistical thing. I was like, I always thought of myself as an open-minded person, right? Like I don't come into things with judgment. And I judged every single person in that room before I even stepped in there because they voted for this person, they voted for that person. And as soon as I got out, I called my partner, Barry Levinson, and I said, I don't know what this is going to look like, but we're going to do something, and we're going to humanize the right to the left and the left to the right, because I want to mimic exactly the experience I had. And I had no idea what it would look like. Like I went off the deep end for a while. I was going to do like a whole camp of bringing people together from both sides. I was talking to Navy SEAL trainers. Like it had gone crazy. And then I spoke to Barry and I sort of pitched it. It was literally like I gave him like a 2-hour pitch. I was like deep in it. And I said, but I also had this other idea of maybe we just set it in a small town and just like idyllic community and like things have gotten bad recently. And he was like, yeah, I like the second idea better. And then I had the same conversation with Robert, and Robert said the same thing. And, I want to touch on one thing. Like, it's been a beautiful process for us. Like, it was really, I kind of trusted Robert from day one, but we also had to get to know each other. We literally showed up in Bucks County not knowing like a single person, walking into bookstores, walking into diners. And he's so open, he is so curious. And I feel like I learned a lot from him on this project of just sort of like seeing the humanity and always seeing it and always being curious and trying to get to know somebody. Because if you start with curiosity, that can open up doors. You don't have to start with like love or whatever or admiration, but curiosity is kind of like the first step.
Yeah, that practice of curiosity is so important and so hard in this political climate right now. And I think this first clip, which Robert, I'll let you tee up a little bit more, highlights some of the name calling that happens and why it's so difficult to have that spirit of curiosity.
So this is actually the first 2 minutes of episode 1, and the name calling, as it's referred to, is a concept that Jason came up with the very first day we started shooting, because we knew that people were called names, and so we wanted to explore that with our participants.
I've been called a pedophile.
I've been called a Nazi.
I've been called anti-American.
I have been called a COVID denier.
I've been called a dyke and a groomer.
Insurrectionist, homophobe,
bigot, fascist,
condescending,
A transphobe.
I've been called everything except a neighbor.
Many Americans feel we're living through an extraordinarily divided time.
You're producing and narrating this new documentary called America's Burning.
I don't know if you noticed, but things are kind of crazy lately. Why has everything gotten so angry?
An offshoot of the pandemic are the rising tensions we've probably all been feeling. Some people are calling it COVID rage.
This is a daily. School board meetings have become the site of heated, at times violent fights over the country's most polarizing issues. Even if it started with the question of whether the schools should reopen, the focus has become so political.
The co-founders of Moms for Liberty join us right now, live from Orlando.
This is just the beginning of parents' voices being heard in their children's education in our country.
the polarization that is global and national has now come to visit us in Central Bucks County.
I've been called a child abuser, instigator,
a brat, the cause of COVID,
conspiracy theorist,
a cunt,
grandmother killer, a book banner,
the N-word, a school shooter,
a homophobe, a xenophobe, you know, you name it.
As we watch this, many of the people you saw there are in the audience right now, which is a good segue to talking with Hannah and Ginger for a little bit. You are also both producers on the film, on the docuseries, and the practice of how you select and work with participants. It's really almost like a sacred thing. And if you're making a documentary film or a docuseries, I've been the subject of a documentary before, The Reunited States, and I know how sometimes awkward it could be. Like, you're trying to capture an authentic moment, but you also have to kind of set it up. So I was hoping you both could just share a little bit from your experiences of kind of that care that goes into working with the participants.
So first of all, I mean, doing a documentary is very different than doing a scripted narrative, because the people you're talking to very often have no experience in front of a camera. So there's a level of comfort and trust that really needs to be established. And it takes a lot of bravery too on the part of the participants, because sometimes you will think that somebody is committed and ready to open up, and you get them in front of a camera and they just never settle. They're not ready to tell their story or to be authentic, and that's okay. But I mean, there's not too much that we can do with that. It takes a really deep level of commitment and trust and bravery from these people telling their stories. And it's really when you find that connection that you're able to sort of work with that and tease that out. And again, it takes a great relationship. Robert did a fantastic job making our participants feel at ease and kind of instilling in them the values of this project. And Ginger as well. I think we've all come to know our participants relatively well, and it's been delightful working with them all.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be brought on a little bit later, so like everybody had the relationship, so I kind of had an idea of what was going on. But when I've worked in other areas, I knew that safety is the most important thing. Whether you're a creative, and I mean that for the crew also, people have to feel safe and they have to know that they can trust you, and it's you may have your opinions, but you keep them to yourselves, and it's really important for everybody to know that they are being heard. That whether you agree or you disagree with them, I hear your voice, I see your voice, I'm not gonna step on your lines. Okay, maybe I did a couple times because I talk a lot. But I try not to. I wanna see you, I wanna hear you, and I wanna respect what you bring to the table. And you know what? More times than not, you're gonna enlighten me, and I'm gonna walk out the door and go, wow, maybe I do that. Maybe I didn't think that way before. Maybe I had an aha moment. So I like to provide an area of comfort and safety so people can be creative, they can be themselves, they can speak freely. And honestly, I think in the long run, I got more out of it maybe than they did. But and Jason and Robert both gave me that opportunity to provide that. And working with Hannah has been just a dream. So I feel very lucky to have been brought in.
And I'm curious, as we were talking earlier about, just setting foot in Bucks County for the first time, not knowing anyone there. And so I'm curious, just how much was sort of baked in ahead of time? So for example, a lot of discussions about school boards and issues there. Did you know that was going to be a big issue, or was that something you just sort of picked up as you observed what was going on in the community? Maybe Robert, if you want to take that.
Well, Jason, do you want to talk about that actually? Because you found the Daily.
Yeah, the setup to it was there was a really good podcast on the Daily, and it was all about Bucks County and the school board wars. And this was at the point where I was in my search of trying to find where to set this. And in the beginning of that podcast, they play audio of sort of threats that are happening, screaming, a lot of the stuff you sort of hear there. And again, it was like the same thing. I was like, I heard the pain in this community. I heard the wound. I was like, there's trauma here. Let's go to the trauma. And then I sent it to Robert, and he agreed. And then you can take, so how we navigated being on the ground.
Well, I remember that first day in Bucks County. None of it. I mean, I had been there once before, but didn't know a whole lot about it. But I remember we had someone on the ground who I wish she could be here. She couldn't be here because of a medical thing, but Evie Inu, who was our person on the ground that we connected with to help connect us with the community. And she set us up with this little cafe called Duck Soup. So Jason and I went there for lunch, and we walked around to all the tables and just kind of interrupted their lunch and said, hi, how are you? We're considering making a film about division. And some of them would go, oh, what? No, or whatever. But eventually people would talk. And I don't think we actually selected anyone from that lunch. But a funny story about it is we had one family that were saying, oh, you should talk to our Uncle Joe. Oh, my gosh. Thanksgiving, why he's always entertaining on Thanksgiving. And we're like, oh, and I wrote down his name and I wrote down their name, and they were in our book. And then, wouldn't you believe, eventually we would meet Uncle Joe, but not through them, through other people, and we ended up talking to Uncle Joe. He's not in the first 2 episodes. He'll be in there. Quite a character, someone who also graciously let us in his life. But anyway, it was gradual. And, we found that a more liberal participant was more willing to talk with us, but the conservative participant was much more shy, because they felt like they can't necessarily trust the media. And that was true on the liberal side as well. But eventually we got a couple of takers who would be willing to talk with us. And then once they survived that, they didn't die in talking with us, and they were able to tell other people, like, you'll survive it. I don't think they're so bad. We had people, and it's in the later episodes that were, when they gave us the opportunity, they were waiting for another shoe to drop. And, I would have to assure there wasn't going to be another shoe to drop from us. And so gradually, people learned that we were genuine in our interest and curiosity. And eventually, I can't think of a person that we really wanted to talk to that didn't finally agree to talk with us. Some of them were very difficult. We always had support from some of the people we had just talked to, which I think was also felt good.
One of the things that was sad was a lot of those people that we first met, they were like, we don't want to talk to you, like, we don't want to get fired, we don't want our store to be trashed, we don't want people calling my job. And both of us were like, what the hell has happened here that people can't just share their story without fear of losing their job or somebody calling their job? Like, this has gotten really bad. Yeah.
And I think one reason why the discussion of school board issues is a really appropriate entry point is I think the number one invitation that a lot of people have to become active in local political issues as an activist really is what's happening at the school board level. Through my work on the ground across America, I often ask people, like, how did you become so active in politics? They'll say, oh, this issue at the school board, and then they get really fired up about that and explain why they started volunteering and knocking on doors and showing up to school board meetings. So you have that local dimension, but there's also a national layer too, which is Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which I should mention, I spent 5 of my earliest years in Bucks County, so I do have a personal connection to the area. That is a swing area in the largest, currently probably the most important swing state in America. Was that part of the thinking here with kind of going into that community?
Yes and no. Like it was that podcast that keyed us in, and it was that first trip where we were just sort of drawn to the place. And then as Pennsylvania got more and more of the spotlight, it was sort of like, oh, we made the right decision. Like it was like, it wasn't completely calculated.
Yeah, I think to add to that, we learned as we didn't go in there thinking, let's pick the most, the perfect state, because we could have done this anywhere, and we were willing to do it anywhere. So it was a little bit happenstance. But I think what the thing with the school boards were that we initially started to follow the adults and the vitriol at the school boards, and we realized that parents were coming from both sides of their political beliefs to the school board meetings, and that they were fighting for their children. And a lot of them were saying the same thing, different words, different approaches, but they were fighting for their children. The school boards became the fighting ring where these fights would occur. And so while we were doing that, we thought, why shouldn't we talk to kids? Because they're fighting over the children, they're fighting over the students. Let's then start to bring the students into the conversation, which is what led us then to incorporating a great deal of students in the film.
And
series.
Yes, and the student scenes, including the clip we're about to see, are some of my favorite, because I think the students exercise some of the best bridging muscles that I've seen in the way that the students really speak from their hearts, and avoiding some of the tired partisan ideological talking points and just getting more at the your lived experience is undeniable, and so that's why it's so helpful to start with that. in a difficult bridging kind of conversation. And so maybe, Hannah, you could help tee up this next clip, which is a scene of students having a conversation.
Sure. So one of the things that we had always wanted to do on some level was bring both sides together and just kind of have them discuss these issues that were so dear to them. And in speaking to the students so much, we thought it would be really great to get their perspectives. So we created a roundtable conversation with, I think, 4 students from each sort of side, each more conservative leaning and more. Five from each side. And kind of, we had 2 moderators who sort of helped to facilitate discussion and ask them questions. And we really just asked them to generously listen, to consider each other's points of view, and just share from their own personal experience. And it was a really wonderful experience. And they had a lot to say, and they listened well. Even when it got tense at moments, they were able to kind of bring it back and maintain civility in a level that wasn't necessarily there at the school boards all the time. So I think they set a great example for the adults.
Let's watch.
I see more pride flags in my school than American flags, and it makes people who have a different opinion than that feel a little unsafe. Like, you have to think about the other side too.
Like, it's not like really an opinion to like acknowledge that people exist.
Well, it's making the other side not feel as secure in faith.
Some people just don't feel safe with what the pride flags are getting the point across.
I'd like to pick your brain on something if I can. It doesn't mean to, belittle other people or make other people unsafe. It's just to uplift certain people who are really struggling now instead of tearing down other people.
We can probably acknowledge that the LGBTQ community does experience some form of hate. There's a conflict going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. Is it safe to say that next to an LGBTQ flag, we should hang a flag for Israel? Where do marginalized communities, where do we stop representing them?
I just think, look at our differences, like put them aside and then find the connections where we can shake hands and come together to find a solution instead of just fighting over our differences.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the power of young people to transform our discussion in America right now. And I, as Sarah referenced earlier, prior to this current work with Bridge Entertainment Labs, founded Future Caucus, which is about the young leaders who are entering elected office, and are they leading as sort of bomb throwers or bridge builders? And we're trying to move people towards the latter. And that's how I entered this whole bridge building movement, and now through Bridge Entertainment Labs, trying to bring that conversation to the entertainment industry. And one of the fun parts of that is when people in the entertainment world are like, their eyes get really big, and they're like, so this whole bridging movement, what is that? And what are these organizations? And so, Sarah, I'm hoping you could jump in, because I'm sure this is new for a lot of people in this audience as well, to just help orient all of us around, what is this movement and what's happening on the ground? Because I think a lot of people feel really hopeful when they hear, oh, this is happening, to exercise their muscles in the ways that the students were. That's happening right now. So I'd love to hear just some of your impressions on that, Sarah.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a kind of good news, bad news story. I mean, the bad news is that America has become polarized enough and divided enough that we started seeing about 10 years ago, a lot of experts from the international peace building world start to turn their attention to the US and go, hey, we have experience helping to keep the peace amidst sectarian conflict and violence. There's a playbook. There are lessons we can learn from societies that have torn themselves apart that we can apply here to prevent us from getting to the same place. And that's the good news, is that there are some really incredible, thoughtful people who are committing their lives to building those capacities in the US and building the institutions that'll help us be more resilient and collaborative in the face of difference. And there are now dozens of organizations that are doing the hard work in communities of equipping leaders and equipping citizens to solve problems together. And, I think something that encourages me, and then maybe something that I'd call in this room to help with, they're pretty simple tools. They're pretty, and happy to dive into that later if it's helpful. They're pretty easy practices. It's a challenge of scale for the organizations that are doing the work and doing the training, which philanthropy can help with. But I think the biggest barrier to overcome is this, really this illusion that we're living in. There's a great scholar by the name of Todd Rose, former Harvard neuroscientist, who started a think tank called Populace, and what they found that really moved me was that we believe the other side to be much more extreme than they actually are. The vast majority of Americans think like 80-85% agree on the vast majority of issues. We just think we don't agree, and we're scared to speak out for all the reasons that you just mentioned in this film. So stories can play such a powerful role in creating a permission structure. It can tell people, hey, actually, your fellow American wants to have this conversation with you. Your fellow American wants to engage in this way with you, and we all want to get to a better place. So all of that to say, there are so many good organizations out there ready to do this work. We've just got to collectively create the invitation for people to join in with them and participate.
Yeah, I think that invitation and the permission is so important because I find a lot of people are hesitant to sort of take that first step. And it's hard to build a bridge if you're not being told that there's one to build, that one doesn't exist. And there are so many. And inevitably, they say it's hard to hate up close. And inevitably, when you have these humanizing conversations that are rooted in shared lived experiences, you find out that the other person is maybe not as evil as you thought. They call this the perception gap, where you assume that you kind of lump in a person on the other side with the worst of the other side. And that becomes really difficult. And then a really tough question arises, which is, am I giving up a part of myself by having this conversation or by associating with someone across a political difference? So that becomes really hard too. And the metaphor I use here is like, I came to this work through music. I grew up playing in a lot of different bands in Milwaukee. And the thing I learned particularly with jazz music is you can only play if you start listening. And the kind of spaces we would create would really affirm the dignity of everyone there. And the music got better because you were invited to bring your lived experiences, your perspectives, your values. And there's even a term in jazz music called a call and response, where you go back and forth with other musicians. So you hear what one person is expressing from their heart, and then you reinvent it through your own originality. And so the point with that metaphor is that you're not giving up a piece of yourself. In fact, the band is more successful because you're bringing your full self to the table. And that, I think, is a really necessary reframing for people as we think about these bridging conversations. There's so many interesting practitioner examples, but I'm curious, Sarah, if there are any that you wanted to highlight here.
Yeah.
That are maybe relevant to the docuseries.
Maybe call out two things. And one is just there are, like I mentioned, dozens of great organizations, and the tools really are pretty simple. I mean, these are, for the most part, this is a set of practices like active listening, listening to the other person with real curiosity, not that thing we all do where we're just waiting for them to finish their point so that we can jump in and argue with them with our point. It's things like making sure that you're not just talking across lines of difference, you're actually working to build something together, because when we're pursuing something in common cause, it takes us out of it, it transcends those differences. And simple things like breath work. It takes a fraction of a second for adrenaline to hit our body and put us in a fight or flight mode. Super helpful when we were living in a time where we were getting chased by bears, not super helpful at the Thanksgiving dinner table. It takes 20 minutes to lower your adrenaline after that happens, and something as powerful as taking a breath and taking a walk can get you far. But a specific organization I'll call out for the folks in this room who are all storytellers, great group called Narrative 4, founded by an author by the name of Colin McCann, and now a network of artists. The model that they use that's really powerful in K-12 education is called a story exchange. So we would sit down, Robert and I would sit, tell each other our stories, and then in front of the group, I would stand up, introduce myself as Robert, and tell his story in the first person. Hello, my name is Robert, and I'm going to tell you about the time at Thanksgiving dinner where my uncle yelled at me, and it hurt me, and here's what we did. Just by putting yourself in the other person's shoes, you're not just more open to that other person, you're open to everyone else you meet and converse with afterwards. So working to scale that program in schools around the country, because as you learn from this film, the way forward really is in the next generation.
And it can be hard and a lot of fun. I really enjoy, these types of conversations. I think you have the chance to learn something new, perhaps become a better advocate. And we're having a lot of great conversations within the entertainment industry. And so this next question is for anyone on the Bucks County team that wants to speak to it. Part of our goal is to influence the industry, because it's not just how you tell the stories, which we've been talking about, but it's choosing to tell the stories and maybe creating the permission structure for the storytelling industry to dive into these themes. And so how do you hope Bucks County, USA impacts the industry that you're coming from?
So usually the way the industry works is like somebody's got to break the mold, and the mold is successful, and then the studios and the streamers will all run to it. So like a big movement right now is independent TV. There's been independent film for 30, 40 years. Independent TV is a new thing where financing is obtained. You make 8 to 10 episodes, and then you try and sell it to Netflix or Apple or whoever. No one's really pulled it off yet, but as soon as somebody does and there's a $30 million sale, then you're going to see the industry shift. And so it's this is why we hope this is like a groundbreaking thing. People see there's a large audience for this type of entertainment, and then it's successful, and then a bunch of other people will flood in. That's my opinion.
And I think with a project like this, it reminds me of a project that we did prior, another documentary, but it was a feature called Kids for Cash. And it was about these two judges that were accused of taking millions of dollars in exchange for sending kids into private for-profit prisons. And so we followed both sides of the story, the judges and the kids. But we discovered a bigger issue, and it was the juvenile justice system and how broken it was. And that's the spinach. That's the spinach that nobody wants to eat. And if we had led with, you're going to see a film about the juvenile justice system, people would say, no, thank you. Even though they should see it, they would say, no, thank you. But they were attracted by the entertainment part of it, which was the fact that we had these judges who were the villains in that story. When you look at a project like this, you still have to find the entertainment value, because if it's just an exposure of what we're all living through, nobody wants to see that. So I think in this particular case, seeing some of the vitriol, hearing some of the vitriol is entertaining for some. It's close to their own lives for others, but it also is real life, and you want people to feel like, well, how's this work out? Like, are these people going to talk to one another afterwards? And that becomes part of the entertainment motor as well. That's what we're trying to do with this project.
And maybe, Ginger, if you want to speak to this, for other storytellers who might be in the room who want to dive into these themes, is there something about the making of it, the how you set up the stories that should be taken into account for other storytellers who want to get into this?
I mean, I think it's individual for everybody. I mean, this could have been a plot-based story, and it would have been fine. When I came on board, I was one of those people who was in the field originally, and I kept on thinking, who's going to have to watch 500 hours of this story and put something together? And it ended up being me. But what I will say is I kept on, when I first watched, I was intrigued by the school board. I really was, and I was intrigued by the conflict. But I think every single character talked about how Bucks was purple. Bucks is purple. Bucks is the bellwether. And I kept on thinking, purple, 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 wounded, wounded, wounded. The way I came at storytelling from a long time ago was character-driven. If I watch a story, even if it's science fiction, but if I hook into the character and I find their humor, I find their heart, and I can connect on some level, then I'm going to watch. So as much as I said, okay, here's the vitriol, honestly, that would have maybe hooked me for 30 minutes, and then I would have been done. And I knew that each of these people had a great story. Everybody has, it's from their past, from their childhood, things that they've lived through during their life that comes to the table. And I thought that was really important, and the audience has to connect with that. Because if they don't, I mean, that's the humanity. We all have humanity, and we have to get back to that place and time. So I think anybody moving forward doing a story, yes, it's important to build bridges, but it's always important for me to tell a character-driven story that people can connect to. What Jason's going to connect to is not maybe what I'm going to connect to, or what Hannah, what Robert, but we all will connect to somebody. I'm one of those Sex and the City characters. I swear, I am. So, I mean, I think that's what we need.
Absolutely.
I just want to add that Ginger is a short sleeper, a certified short sleeper, which she sleeps maybe 4 hours a night. So that's how she was able to watch 500 hours of footage.
Incredible. Well, as we've been talking a lot over the last month, and I would say one of the moments that definitely impacted us a lot and even kind of gave us goosebumps was when you were talking about how the team and the crew of Bucks County, USA was impacted through this process. And I feel like obviously you're going to be passionate about the story, that's why you're doing it, but to impact you on a deeper level, on a soul level, I don't hear that a lot. And so, maybe we can start with Hannah. How did this impact you personally?
So it was definitely a very impactful experience for me. I mean, you're sitting in a room with these participants and you're listening to them speak about their lives and their opinions for 3 hours at a time. And that's just one interview. So there's lots of listening going on. And I mean, you get to know these people and you get to care about them and care for them. And maybe they have opinions that are something that you disagree with, but it really sort of forces you to deconstruct those preconceived notions and judgments that you might have gone into the room with. And I think a lot of us found that the more we listened, the more we found places we might agree with somebody who we would have dismissed in today's day and age if we saw them post something on Twitter or on Facebook. But through generous listening and through being with them for so long and being open to them and their experiences, it really has had a profound impact on a lot of us.
Any others want to?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we discovered, and actually it was Hannah that pointed this out, so it's affected us because we sit with these participants for the last 3 years. We're there in person with them, with you, and then we see them during the edit process. And they have a real impact on us. And even our crew. Our crew are 2 cinematographers, 2 camera assistants, and a second camera operator, our sound mixer. They're all here at Sundance on their own dime because in some way or another, and they're in the room here, some way or another, the project has impacted them as well. And it is remarkable. But then Hannah pointed out something, because we talk about how it's impacted all of us. And then there was an insight that Hannah pointed out to us late, and this is partly what you're talking about when we were talking on the phone. I'm just going to turn it back to Hannah because she can explain what that was.
So I think we all got very wrapped up in how we've been impacted, and you kind of have that sort of psychological mirroring phenomena where we just kind of, came to assume, oh yeah, like we've definitely changed over this. So of course the participants have as well. And we came to realize that that's not exactly the case, because what we were offering the generous listening in that circumstance. We were giving them the chance to really share their experiences and their opinions, and to reach an audience when, in a day and age when maybe they haven't had the chance to fully express their thoughts before they get pushed back against or cut off. So they haven't, in every case, done that generous listening that we have been doing over such an extended period of time. So they're kind of a step behind us in a way, if we're looking at the end goal being bridging divides. But I think that their goal has been to reach an audience and to show that who they are and what they believe. Like every single person obviously is human and has a deep pain from the experiences they've had in the past few years. So they've touched so many people already, and I think that's kind of hard to quantify when all you've seen is a camera in your face and you haven't seen the end result. But I think that they're sort of affecting the audience in a way, and they haven't I don't know how much they realize that, but they've definitely had a profound impact on us.
Yeah, and I hope all of you that are participated, that are with us today, see and feel that tomorrow, that you've sacrificed your stories for the benefit of the audience. The audience will take away from your stories. Not really. But the idea is that you will hopefully see how an audience responds to your stories tomorrow, and that all of those long days and long interviews and all of it was worth it when you see that, in fact, you're having an impact on someone else's life, and then maybe that will have an impact on you as well. That's really what we hope for.
And I think it's hard not to be impacted by one of the main stories in the series, which is the friendship of two 14-year-olds who are both here, that I think model for us that we can express love and friendship with people we might disagree with politically. And I think that ties back to the permission structure we were talking about earlier. So that's a way of teeing up our third clip. Who wants to tee that one up?
Well, I think I will, because what's interesting about this clip that's coming up. So Evie and Vanessa are, their parents are here today too. Their parents have strongly different points of view, but Evie and Vanessa, they have different points of view too with their best friends. And what's amazing about this is that, and I've said this to both of their parents who disagree, not with my statement, but disagree. And basically that they're ahead of the curve in a way, because they've never stopped their kids, their two kids, from becoming best friends. They've never interfered with that. And we know that is not necessarily the commonality. That if families disagree, then they don't allow their children to be friends. And so that didn't happen here. And the other thing, the shout out to these parents who allowed Evie and Vanessa to help guide us through the story, is that they allowed their daughters to be part of the story, and they trusted us. And that is a very big deal for all of us as filmmakers. And so you'll see a little bit of their friendship in this next clip.
Do you think a Dorito could kill someone from George Washington's time?
I mean, probably, because it's like they have like all like the diseases and crap.
Is there a boat that he's gonna go on? So he just went over there?
I think he did.
That's
but, like,
so...
it was like historic.
Dude, that's like nothing.
It was hailing, Vanessa.
I've been friends with Evie for like 2 years. We met in 7th grade social studies.
She's just a really funny, kind, like amazing person. She's so smart. We're best friends and we support each other. And I think I'm really energetic and she's more like mellow, so we balance each other out. And so, yeah.
We're polar opposites, but we find the best things to connect over. We put aside our differences, our different political beliefs, and we just bond over shared interests. We really like history and that kind of stuff.
On that high note, we have time for some questions from the audience. And I think we have a microphone coming up here. Any questions?
Would any of the participants care to comment on any of this? And we're not putting you on the spot. We almost did, but we decided not to.
Or crew. Crew is welcome to comment as well.
Pretend you're at a board meeting.
How you doing? I'm a documentary filmmaker, and the theme of my documentaries is building community, bringing different worlds together, formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated people with society in general, through like art, basketball, things that, and you've ever been in an elevator when you're riding up with somebody from a different world that you don't know, and it felt like this uncomfortable silence as you're going up to the 9th floor and you want to hurry up and get there. So I found ways to break through that. And my question to you guys is, it looks like you're like getting these people together to talk about political stuff, but is there just any period, common ground period that you're using to get people to just find commonality?
Humanity. Because I mean, that's the thing that we've lost, is that we look to other people often as not human, or we treat them less than human. And I think it's humanity. And that's the common piece of it all.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely events that will show in the series that people host that are apolitical and meant to bring people together just across divides. Like there's a candle making party that will show some of that kind of stuff. But the majority of the discussion is focused around, I mean, the center is the school boards, and everyone kind of comes from that center, like and their investment in their kids' lives. I think that's another commonality, is that a lot of them just care so much about their children, their friends' children, and wanting to ensure that they have the best possible life and education.
Yeah, I think the important part of your question is actually a really good point to share more broadly, which is like the example that I think Abby and Vanessa set is that it really does help if you have trust with a person. It could be a friendship or just you've built up a relationship, and that might be because you both love the same kind of music or the same kind of food, or you've connected on something else, and then that allows you to potentially have conversations on difficult issues. So I think that's a really great point you're bringing up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leslie, and I'm one of the editors of the film, and it has definitely affected me in a very concrete way. There is another relationship in the film that models people coming together and deliberately choosing to have gracious listening and conversation across the divide. And I never thought that I would be capable of that until I watched many of these conversations and found myself on a plane sitting next to someone kind of trapped there for hours. And we started out by talking about similarities, which was Star Trek at the time, and that was great. And we bonded and got into the conversation, and suddenly it devolved into understanding that we were both very much on different sides of the issues. And at a certain point, my eyes got big, and I thought, I don't know if I can continue this conversation. And then I thought, no, wait, I've seen two other people do this, and I can do this. And so I did, and it was very beneficial. I tried to just kindly and quietly just say where I was coming from and listen to where this person was coming from. And then when we deplaned, I was like, oh, phew. And as we were leaving the plane, he stopped me and he said, I just want to thank you for listening. He said, nobody listens. I've wanted people to listen for so long, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. So I just want to thank the participants in the film for modeling that for me in a way that I believe can help me move forward in positive change. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Martino. I'm Vanessa's dad. And I want to say a very personal thing, in particular to Robert, having gotten to witness the creative process. Robert asked Arthi and I if we'd be okay with having Vanessa go to a round table, and it sounded like it was just a flyer. At the time, it sounded like it was a flyer. And about a week later, Robert called back and he said, wow, the kids were really awesome on camera. What do you think about us doing more stuff with the kids? And then eventually it went from a request or two for Arthi and I to all the requests for Vanessa. And so knowing that this started a little bit from the daily podcast, which was all about the parents, it was fascinating to watch the way the creative process unfolded, and a little bit of serendipity with the girls happened. And I'm just saying, as someone who's been in the creative process before, that seemed like a real magic moment, and it's interesting to have been a part of it in a different way as the dad, as opposed to the participant.
I want to say it's really inspiring to see people modeling these bridging skills. I'm curious if in the process of preparing to make this, and in the process of meeting people from Bucks County, if you received criticism that you were giving voice to the other side, whichever side that be, and how you address those people who were afraid that you might empower people who disagreed with them.
I mean, Robert has more experience with that than I do, but it's certainly something that came. Do you want to start with that?
Well, sure, and we knew this would happen. Like in the other project that I mentioned, Kids for Cash, we didn't tell the kids and families that were actually part of the juvenile system that these judges were sending away. We did not tell them that we were also interviewing the judges until the film was finished and we showed it to them individually and we told them why the judges were in the film. That people had to have a very well-rounded view of the story in order to evolve. And it's the same thing here. We know how entrenched people were that we spoke with on their side, but the only way we'll grow is to hear the other side. We don't have to agree with them. We just have to listen generously to them. And these are conversations that I have had with many of our folks here that participated, because there were some concerns about that. And by the way, when you build trust with someone over such a long period of time, sometimes those folks feel like, the trust is exclusively between the two of us, the interviewer and the interviewee. And when folks find out, well, you're also talking to somebody from the other side, sometimes they feel betrayed. How could you do that? How could you talk? And we didn't have those exact conversations, but I've experienced that before. And I think when all our cards are on the table, when people realize we're not trying to pigeonhole anyone, we're not trying for gotcha moments, we're clearly not siding one way or the other, we've been able to navigate all of that, those sorts of questions and conversations. And again, I would invite, not push, but invite anyone that we did speak with in the series, if they want to speak to this, please do so. Oh, I see somebody's doing it. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm one of the participants, and this microphone is too tall for me.
Tilt it.
I've really struggled with that issue, the issue of, if you believe this, is it proper, is it helpful to engage with people who really disagree with you? Does it countenance positions that you don't share? And again, like I really have struggled, like, am I letting people down who are being hurt, in my opinion, by the stances of the other side that I disagree with? And what I came to with some help, I want to really shout out to my husband on this because he really helped me. I'm a teacher. And teachers don't ever, must never say, I'll teach you, but I'm not going to teach you. For whatever reason, it's just not moral. And so if we think of ourselves as teachers in the community, and I want to say, I feel a sense of just like longing to belong to each other and to not have this animosity. And I know there are people in the room who disagree with me and who feel that, all of the feelings. But it's like I can just feel this sense of like, Doylestown is a beautiful place. Bucks County is a beautiful place. We want to wrap everybody into it. And that the teaching piece of it, the sense that whoever you are will begin where you are. And maybe we can together open each other's minds to understanding that the way we perceive it is necessarily limited, that none of us sees the whole picture. And that if we can grant each other and ourselves that mercy, like you're not smart enough to see the whole thing, any one of us. So we need each other to get a broader perspective that drains the issue down to why would I engage with the other side? Well, because nobody's got the whole truth.
Hello. I want to express my excitement and admiration that this project is coming into the world. And the mission that you expressed that I know Stephen's been pursuing. That was the inspiration for this project, is 100% aligned with what my life's work has been for the last few years. And this is actually a follow-on to each of the last two questions, which expressed the inherent, conflict over participating in something like this. The question I have is, how do we get the people who need to see this story to actually watch it in the first place?
I mean, that's a very complicated question, and I'm not a marketing expert. I think the one is you need distribution, you need support, you need funding, you need really good publicity relations. But everybody knows there's an audience out there, and so I think it's just putting it out there, and it's putting it out there at the right time and targeting those people that you know are going to want to hear this, and probably going into those places that are a little uncomfortable to go into, and just talk about it and push it there and go like, it's like, I don't watch Fox News, but like I would love to go talk to the Fox audience and be like, we did this, this is why we did this, and have them all in this audience right here.
I would also add that we know that, we feel the project is supported by the folks that we talked with. I don't think they'd be here. And we have a pretty good division of political opinions that are represented in the film that are also here supporting it. So I think that hopefully we've got as close to non-bias as you can get, because when you preach to the choir, that's what you get from either choir. And we didn't do that. So if word starts to get around that, in fact, this is a series for everyone, no matter what your political belief, maybe that helps people be curious to want to see it.
I feel like we're just getting warmed up, but we have time for one more question. Thank you.
Thanks. I feel like this was a perfect tee-up and segue. My name is Andre Smith. I'm an executive producer, director of strategy at APX. We're a strategy studio focusing on brand purpose and social impact. My question for you, springboarding off of this part where, how do we, when it's something for everyone, and we know that brands really want to be in the conversation, I guess my question for you all is, hindsight, what brands would have been choice or preferred to work with to help amplify this, like leveraging their social powers, their brand power, their brand equity, to spotlight conversations around what Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to be paying attention to and what we watching them should be paying attention to?
We really didn't have any, that's not how we started. We started by trying to tell a story. And then the story would lead us to wherever it went. It was just like we were investigating a crime. You follow the leads, you follow where it goes. And that's what we did here. First, we had to create a story. Starting with that level of support would be hard, because if we set out to say, we want to create a series about political division and vitriol, and we're going to make it non-biased, and we're going to talk to adults, and we're going to talk to kids, and we're going to find two girls that are best friends and their parents don't get along. No one would believe it. They wouldn't think it would be possible to do that. So I think first, we have to just try to assemble a story. And so I think that was our first thing. I just don't think we thought about that part of it at all. Maybe now we might, but
Right, and so
not
in
then.
hindsight, like what brands do you think might have been choice partners to help amplify this?
I really have no idea.
Yeah, the truth is Robert and I are kind of lame and we don't know the brand world that well, so we're the wrong people to ask. Yeah.
I want to give you guys a little more credit than that, because I think you did think about it and you thought about it in kind of the financing of the film and who you brought in to figure out how to bring this to people. And I think the brand question is great, and we need to further explore that. But I think the most powerful way to really get the word out about this film is a truly bottom-up approach. People trust their local messengers. This has got to get out there via faith organizations and local chambers of commerce and hyper-local brands. We're operating in a low-trust environment. So who are those actors who are already walking alongside people from their journey from pain to purpose, who can weave in a story like this? And I just want to underscore one point that was made earlier as we wrap up. It really has to be a story for everyone. A lot of people think it's that group that needs to hear this message, not not my group. Last piece of research I'll toss out at you. The thing that keeps me up at night is how untenable the resentment levels are in the U.S. It's the stuff of revolution, and it's across the spectrum. It's every age demographic. It's every political ideology. No one feels heard. To your point, everyone is craving that belonging. And though I understand how morally difficult it can be to hear something that you so fundamentally disagree with, there's no other way to heal the divides than to provide that outlet and start to reach this understanding. So I think it's an imperative to keep our country together, and I'm just so grateful for everyone who's leaning into that.
Sarah, actually, you do bring up a good point, because the project was funded by both conservative-leaning and liberal-leaning funders. That was a prerequisite, and so while they had no editorial control over the project at all, it was supported based on the concept that we did present. So that's actually a good point. Sort of forgot the big one right there in front of us.
We're eager to help get it into the hands of everybody.
Money's not important.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions, and to our entire team here. This has been a lot of fun, and I encourage you to see us as a resource. We're going to hang around and be here for further conversation. As we said at the top of this, Bucks County USA premieres tomorrow, so we encourage you to check out that premiere, and just encourage everyone to exercise their bridging muscles wherever they are, wherever you are on your journey. It's worthwhile. We live in a diverse democracy that requires us to find that sense of belonging, like you mentioned. And it's so hard, it feels like we're swimming upstream, because there is a division industrial complex that makes a lot of money on making us hate each other. I've seen that system behind the scenes, that political and media system, and it's very powerful. And so just know that our buttons are getting pushed by them, and that system should not win out over our own ability to connect with each other. And I think the greatest force we have to do that is by telling stories, whether that's locally in our communities, with our local theater groups or other ways that we do that, or stories at scale that premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. I think that is the solution that has the kind of force and power to it to take on that system. So thank you all so much for being here to support this premiere and this conversation. We look forward to continuing it with you. Thank you all. Have a great night.